Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. Subscribe to Saturday Down South on YouTube. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, let's start with some inspiration. We're in 2026 now. Maybe people are looking to get inspired, stick to their New Year's resolutions. I can do this. I can paint a new picture of my life and what it's going to look like. Should we start off with that?
Look, Connor, the transfer portal is open. I'm chock full of hopium right now.
Well, you should be, because Chad Morris is Clemson's offensive coordinator now. If you can do it, if he can do it, if I could judge. No. Chad Morris, in the year of our Lord 2026, has been hired to be Dabo Swinney's savior offensive coordinator. What a country we live in, Will. What a country wherein something like that can happen.
Of the 1,000 ways you could have gone there, that was actually the least expected for me. But you're right. It's such an inspirational story. I mean, a guy that, he's been a coach in football. He's been around. So again, hey, if he had the confidence to go walk in there, shake Dabo's hand and be like, I deserve this job. And Dabo would say, hey, you know what? I like the cut of this guy's jib. I think we should have this guy around. You could do anything, America.
He gets the culture here. And never mind the fact that Clemson went on this historic tear after he left Clemson. We don't need to get into that. Will, I want you and the people at home to do an exercise that I did yesterday. Just pull up Chad Morris's Wikipedia page right now. Do it. Because if you need inspiration, if you're listening to this thinking, man, I don't want to go to the gym today. I don't want to read this book. I know I guaranteed I was going to read 20 books this year. I can't get myself to have the courage to do this. Let Chad Morris inspire you, because you can fail and then fail some more, and then still just be given a job that's extremely coveted, that's going to make you seven figures, that will give you all sorts of power that you don't deserve. That man is an inspiration. I've done a 180 on Chad Morris, despite the fact that this is going to fail horrifically, and Dabo Swinney, in my opinion, should be fired on the spot for even thinking this move is worth doing, much less actually going through with it and putting pen to paper. I'm now doing a 180 on Chad Morris. He is an inspiration to all. He is the light that we need in the year 2026 to motivate us to do great things in this world.
The best part is when I Googled him, the kind of default picture of him is a person looking more clueless than I've ever seen. Like if I walked into a Buffalo Wild Wings and they only spoke Korean, that's the look on his face. Like,
Korean wings are delicious.
It's
delicious.
It's like, maybe I could figure this out, but give me 15 minutes. I got to pull out the app. He looks so lost. And yeah, I mean, last year he was the
nothing. He was the nothing, Will. He did nothing.
Right.
So here's the thing. Chad Morris, after 1 year as the Texas State wide receivers coach with G.J. Kinney, who's one of the up-and-comers in this sport, decided, I'm going to step away. I'm going to take a year off of football. No one was hiring him. Dabo Swinney has an offensive coordinator position for one of the better assistant jobs in football. And he said, Chad Morris, he's available. Thank the Lord I can go out there and hire Chad Morris. What in the world has Chad Morris done since? I'll give him the benefit of SMU, even though other people have done better things at SMU. What has he done since SMU that has been worth keeping on a staff, much less giving an offense to? I'm truly blown away. I do you know how many times I clicked on Pete Thamel's Twitter bio to make sure that was the real Pete Thamel and that the blue check wasn't throwing me off or something like that? 5 or 6 times. And then
it was a wheat Thamel. I've done that so many times. Just be like, huh?
Like everybody talks about, like with Shams, the Luka tweet, the Luka trade tweet. Everybody had to click on it over and over to make sure that he didn't get hacked or something like that. Like he had people reaching out to him. If you've seen like the Netflix Starting 5 special, he had like people that were reaching out to him like, bro, did you just get hacked? Like, this is so unbelievable. I really legitimately thought it was more likely that Pete Thamel got hacked and someone tweeted this information that Chad Morris was Clemson's offensive coordinator, more so than Chad Morris actually getting the offensive coordinator job at Clemson. I'm blown away. Impossible is nothing.
Yeah, I'm looking through his Twitter here live, Connor, and it looks like he's doing a lot of supporting of Virginia. Obviously, Tony Elliott's over there now. I don't even really know their connection. I'm sure Tony Elliott probably worked for him at some point in time. But it's just constant. It's like a UVA fan account for the last, and he tweets a lot. Like I'm into September now, and I've been scrolling this whole time. So he's been on the Bird or on the X
Good.
app. That's what he's been up to.
I would love to know the whereabouts of Chad Morris the last 5-6 years. I really, really, and I'm not talking about like just his Wikipedia page, just what he's been doing, but how he's been seeing this game of football that he failed at worse than any SEC coach in the 21st century. I would love to know.
This is just a Tony Elliott hype account. I've seen like 20 straight Tony Elliott tweets.
They worked
And then,
together at Clemson, so like they were obviously very tight. Yeah.
But like that's that's what you could hope for the boys. You take a year off and you're just hyping the homies publicly to your like 100K followers. So good for him. And quick, not to turn this into an actual take here, but like doesn't that kind of tell you the actual value of that coordinator position in the world that people were not lining up probably for Dabo to be like, please give me this job?
No. See, here's the thing. I don't even know if we know that.
You think he was just on D&D? You think it was just like, hey, don't even try to cut. Do not contact. He's in the portal for do not contact, waiting on Chad Morris to open Twitter.
I really think that Dabo is so desperate to get back to his core days. Either that or he's just doing the thing where he's like, they're not going to fire me if I do this, right? Like he's just pushing the limits as much as he possibly can just to see what he can get away with. At this point, he knows he's not competing for a championship. Just entertain yourself. Just see what you can get away with under your own roof. If you're having a bad day, just remember life could be worse because Chad Morris could be your offensive coordinator. Anyway, we got a lot to get to. We're going to cover a lot of ground. I texted Will last night. I'm like, Will, we're going to cover a lot of ground on this pod. Here is the plan for today. We are going to preview the 2 semifinal games, and then we've got some takeaways from the SEC's bowl season so far, which is pretty much in the books with the exception of Ole Miss and it's this remaining playoff run. Our guy, Michael Katz, he's going to join us in a bit to talk about this wild Ole Miss season, and then we're going to close with a lad of the week. All right, FIESTA Bowl. Let's start with it, Will. Ole Miss, Miami. Miami's a 3.5-point favorite. The over-under I have is 1. Miami sack of Trinidad Chambliss. That's right. 1. 12 sacks that Miami has had in the first 2 college football playoff games that they've played in. And this has been a unit that is playing as well as anybody left in the field. Chambliss has taken just 1 sack in the last 3 games, even though he's been pressured 21 times. He's been, I think, very good in those spots besides just getting away from pressure. I don't need to tell Georgia fans about that. But he has a better chance of handling that pressure than Marcel Reed, than Julian Sand. I don't think that's that crazy of a take. We know this year, we've talked about it all season with Chambliss. He has been phenomenal under pressure. It's not just that he has only taken 13 sacks this season. He has 94 dropbacks under pressure and just 1 turnover-worthy play. And in non-blitzing situations, he's only taken 1 sack all year. Coverage sacks do not exist with this guy. They just do not. That shows you exactly why he has been so darn tough to beat. If you just send 4, you're very likely not going to get to him. But when he's blitz, he's got a 13-0 TD to INT ratio. For both of these quarterbacks, they've been really tough to pressure, albeit for different reasons. Chambliss has been impossible to pressure because he's very elusive, obviously, but the up-tempo offense, it puts defenses in a tough spot. It's just a tougher offense to be able to register those sacks. We know that guys are on the field when they want to be able to substitute them in and out. They can't necessarily do that with what Ole Miss does. And then Beck has been darn near impossible to pressure because that offense has been getting rid of the football very, very quickly. And when he does go through his progressions, he's got an elite offensive line in front of him. So for all the talk about Carson Beck and his shortcomings, that has to be part of the conversation. It's going to be part of the scouting report for Pete Golding and this Ole Miss defense. Chambliss and Beck have the 2 best pressure to drop back rates of any FBS quarterback. Okay. These guys have not been pressured whatsoever, something that we'll talk about with Michael Katz. Both have taken 13 sacks this year. Worth noting, multiple sacks taken for Carson Beck in each of the last 3 games. They have been able to win those games, though. That included the Ohio State game when he got pressured 10 times, but only took 2 sacks and he didn't turn the football over. That was a very, very different story than the last time that he saw double-digit pressures, which was the Louisville game when he threw 4 picks and Miami lost a game that made everyone go, oh yeah, Carson Beck still very much has some 2024 Georgia in him. Okay. Since that game, that loss against Louisville on that Friday night, he has just 4 turnover-worthy plays. That's according to PFF. Obviously, this is a bend, don't break Ole Miss defense. They would love, in their ideal world, to force multiple turnovers of Beck. That hasn't really been Ole Miss's thing this year. Only 14 turnovers forced. They're one of 8 FBS teams with a turnover margin on the season of exactly 0. That's it. One of those other teams, Georgia, ironically enough. Against Georgia, Ole Miss's only turnover force was on that Suntaran Perkins strip sack of Gunnar Stockton on 4th down. Though, as Daniel Hodges reminded me in the Saturday Down South Facebook group, that was the byproduct of a backup center who didn't realize that Georgia was just trying to get Ole Miss off sides, wasn't really supposed to snap it. Error on my part in the recap pod. You get it. It was a communication breakdown. Weird play that Ole Miss ultimately benefited from. What I'm trying to say is I don't know that we can all look at Carson Beck in this game, in this matchup, and go, oh, you turn him over, you win the game. But for my money, I don't think Ole Miss can really bank on that. I don't think they can. Obviously, you have to take advantage of those opportunities if they come. If Carson Beck is going to throw a duck in the middle of the field and you've got a defensive back that's just licking his chops that can't hit you in the face mask and bounce off the ground and have just another opportunity on 3rd down. Of course, okay? Like everybody understands that. The problem is that Miami offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson is very aware of that. More aware of that than all of us because he has seen Carson Beck play football at Miami this past season. He has had less than 2.5 seconds to throw in each of Beck's last 4 games, meaning they're getting rid of the football quickly. Okay, that is the plan. That is the way that this offense is designed.
Less time, good. Not less time, Ty Simpson, bad guys in your face. Like, don't make Carson Beck think. It's all going according to plan, folks.
Exactly. Not like less than 2.5 seconds to throw. Oh man, like he must really be getting pressure, and he's got guys that are coming through the A gap, and he just doesn't know what's what. No. This guy is getting rid of the football very, very quickly. On the year, he ranks 87th in FBS with just 12.8% of his attempts going 20 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. He's got 1 20-yard completion in 2 playoff games, and it was a pass that traveled 3 yards beyond the line of scrimmage on a quick hitch to Keelan Marion, who had a nice run after the catch to pick up 17 more yards. So you get it. All right. They have not had a downfield passing attack really at all in these playoffs so far. This Miami offense, it's not really like the Quinn Ewers Texas offense. It's not that with only the short passes, because so much of that, and we talked about this a lot last year, was slow developing, sideline to sideline type stuff, like misdirection. And it's kind of similar, actually. Miami does stuff that's kind of similar to what Georgia wants to do. And instead of Carson Beck getting it to Zachariah Branch, it's Carson Beck getting it to Malachi Toney. Very, very similar. I thought Branch played an outstanding game against Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss has to be better against Toney than it was against Branch. Okay, I do. They can take the Ohio State game plan if they want to. Easier said than done, because they were holding Malachi Toney to nothing after the catch. He had 13 yak yards in that game, which was the lowest of his very young career. No small feat to be able to do that. What's wild is that Miami has gotten to this point, even though I've talked a lot about Malachi Toney, and I think Ohio State and Texas A&M both did exactly what they set out to do against him. I mean, A&M even forced that key turnover of Toney where they had the fumble of him, and that was potentially going to be a game-breaking play. And instead, Toney has been pretty quiet so far in these first 2 playoff games. So it's not as if he's the straw that stirs the drink for Miami, even though he is very clearly the biggest threat in that offense. The straw that stirs the drink for Miami is Mark Fletcher. Let's not get it twisted. It's not Carson Beck. It's not Malachi Toney. It is Mark Fletcher. He is healthy, or at least he looks healthy. He's the guy that can prevent Ole Miss from playing this bend, don't break defense. 2 playoff games. He's got combined 262 rushing yards, 185 of which have come after first contact. He's got 11 missed tackles forced. He's been great. Teams who are as mediocre as Ole Miss is against the run, they're not supposed to be in this spot. You're supposed to be like, maybe you're playing the Citrus Bowl or something like that, but you have an obvious weakness, or at least it's not considered a strength. And I was supposed to catch up to you at some point. But Ole Miss in 2 playoff games, They have held both teams that they have faced to less than 3.5 yards per carry. Nobody has registered a 20-yard run. You need that type of efficiency if you're going to contain Mark Fletcher. Not surprisingly, the Louisville loss was Miami's worst running game of the season. And I got to think that Shannon Dawson, the Miami offensive coordinator, will trust Fletcher, even if he suffers a costly fumble, much like what he did early on in that Ohio State game, and kind of much like what Ole Miss did with Kewan Lacey, where they said, you know what? If you fumble, we're still going to trust you. We're not going to put you in the doghouse. Our season's on the line. We need you. We know that you're our best chance to be able to win. Will, that was a lot. Thoughts on that before we get into some of the other elements of this game?
So I think you're right on the money. And some of the stuff that I was looking at previewing this game was about that Ole Miss run defense, right? And how, I'm not going to call it sorry, but a little bit pedestrian, a little bit mid, right? Like if you'd say there was a weakness to Ole Miss, it would be that. And you look at Miami, now they've won these games, and you go, oh, okay, of course, they're kind of bullying teams down the stretch. But then you think about it, and it's like, yeah, the game plan with Ohio State, quote unquote, included like a 73-yard pick six, like this massive swinging play, you know. I think that, and again, the same thing with Texas A&M, where it was bend, don't break, hold. I don't think that's going to work against Ole Miss. I think that at the end of the day, a Georgia defense that we were talking about was rounding into form, was awesome. Guys were playing the right way. They were getting pressure. Didn't seem to matter against this offense in Trinidad Chambliss.
Wait, real quick. I don't think Miami's bend, don't break. I don't think Miami's defense is bend, don't break. I think Miami breaks you. I think they break opposing offenses, and I think that pick six was an example of them breaking and getting that huge play. I'm saying Ole Miss's defense is bend, don't break.
No, I see you there, but I'm talking about in terms of the game flow of the A&M game. We're sitting there, clinching the whole time, going one play could swing this. One play could swing this. Like, let's get back on defense and we feel safe. We feel confident. We feel like our defense is out there, and that's a win for us if we're Miami. I think that Ole Miss is the first team that they've seen where Ole Miss's offense being on the field is a win for Ole Miss, right? Against the A&M offense, they were stuck in the mud. Against the Ohio State offense, they were serving up points. For Ole Miss, given what Trinidad Chambliss has shown, exactly what you just said, he doesn't really take sacks. I mean, as far as turnovers go and making the right decision, that's not one of his weaknesses either, because he's able to pull the ball down and make the right decision, I think, in the run game a lot of the time. So I think what Miami has been able to lean on, in these games is on defense, is sitting back on defense and going, hey, we're not scared to punt the ball. We're not scared to let you try to run your game plan and fail. And I think that that's something that's kind of unique for this Ole Miss offense, which is that, what has been their strength all year is that it's not just one guy. Well, I think that could factor in positively here when you think about Lacey and how banged up he's been. I don't think that they have the luxury of leaning on him for 25, 30 carries in this game, just based on his shoulder.
Why
stuff
not,
like
though?
that.
They did against Georgia. He got 24 scrimmage touches against Georgia. Now he gets another week of rest. Like, what's to say he's not going to get that again?
No, I know. I mean, the reports coming out of that from the Ross Dellinger piece was, like I said, that he was kind of wincing, when people were touching his shoulder and stuff. So I think that how about this? I think from Ole Miss's standpoint, they don't want to go big on big with Fletcher versus Lacey based on where these two teams are at in the season, right? The fact that that's worked for Miami, I don't think a rock fight is what Ole Miss wants to see. So I think putting the ball in Chambliss' hands, especially after that masterful performance he had against Georgia, I think Ole Miss needs to take chances and turn this into a shootout, because in college football right now, who are you trusting more than Trinidad Chambliss against that front? And I think at some point, if you want to go beat Miami, you have to be able to take those chances and not be in this low-scoring game, because I think a low-scoring game for sure benefits Miami.
I think there is an element of that's 100% true. I think where it gets a little bit tricky to kind of figure out, if you are Charlie Weiss Jr., the Ole Miss offensive coordinator, and you're trying to figure out what's my plan of attack for this.
The LSU offensive coordinator. He's like on my own.
What's he going to be on Thursday night? It's going to be.
I know. Just play with the interim Ole Miss offensive coordinator.
Darn good at it. If you're trying to figure out where is Miami most vulnerable, sitting back and trying to attack downfield, knowing that Miami pass rush can make a game-changing play in a moment's notice, is probably not where you'd like to live, most likely. At the same time, what was that huge play that Miami's defense benefited from against Ohio State? It's Julian Saint trying to hit a quick hitter to the outside. Keontae Scott reads it perfectly, jumps the route, pick six the other way. So Ole Miss likes to get these guys on the edge. They like to be able to do, those not necessarily just the bubble screens, but quick hitting stuff. And Miami is in a really nice spot where it knows it has a veteran on that back end that can be really aggressive in some of those spots. That's perhaps why it's been so difficult to score points against this unit, because you feel a little bit timid doing some of that. And you saw that A&M, albeit with very different conditions, could not figure out that element of their offense against Miami. None of it worked. And whether that was just based on the prep of that Miami defense and what Corey Heatherman did was really, really impressive. And just seemed like whenever, even when Marcel Reed was on target, like Miami's secondary was just kind of there and ready to make a big time play. And it's this fear of knowing that Ruben Bain and that Miami defensive line, if you don't draw up this quick hitting stuff, you're kind of waiting on them to be able to make that big time play. So I say that because I just think this Miami defense, man, they have shown so few weaknesses in this spot. And if one of those weaknesses is potentially giving the ball to Kewan Lacey 25 times and hoping that you can just maybe kind of figure out a way to run at that defensive line, as great as they are, because I think they're better being able to rush the passer than they are defending the run. Maybe that's an unpopular take, but I think that probably benefits you more than some of the other passing game options, as much as you trust Chambliss to be able to evade some of this pressure.
You know what's interesting? I love the concept of fear there because I fully agree with you. A&M, Marcel Reed, Ohio State, Julian Sayin played with fear for,
Yeah,
I
they
don't
did.
know, 7 quarters of the 8 that they played. After that pick six, it was like the air came out of Ohio State. Yeah, they had the late run, but it like their offense.
Good third quarter. Good third quarter, yeah.
Good third quarter, right? But when your offense doesn't go according to plan, when you see the ball go through the hoop as much as they have, it's like, a big seeded tournament team almost. It's like, what do we do here? We haven't been down by this many points since 2023. I think that for Ole Miss, it almost wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to get a turnover out of their system early. Because, like I said, I just trust Trinidad Chambliss. I think that that's how he's so fundamentally different from these two quarterbacks, is that they've already seen horrors beyond their comprehension within the season. They've already seen Georgia come storming back. They've already seen all the Lane Kiffin drama. And so I think this team is so built to never feel fear. And I think that's exactly what the X factor was in these first 2 games. I think it was that once Miami punched the other team in the mouth, they got scared and they turtled. And I think that, again, we got an interim OC. We got a quarterback who just said he's coming back. We got a running back who just said he's coming back. Who's got it better than us? Let's air it out. And so I think even if you have what would be a game-breaking pick against Marcel Reed or Julian Sayin, that's almost your strength as Ole Miss, because now Miami is expecting you to turtle. So yeah, I think that, just like I said, I couldn't have more respect for Ole Miss and what Chambliss specifically was able to do last game, the reads he was able to make. I would put him out there against anybody right now. And I think that, like I said, I would almost rather get the pick out of your system, make Miami start to feel it a little bit, and then go, hey, we had this against Georgia. We got this. We're going to be fine.
Just like Georgia. You have the huge fumble, the scoop and score from Lacey. That was, at that moment of the game, it felt like, oh man, Georgia's just going to run away with this. And in a weird way, it's almost like Ole Miss snaps out of it and snaps out of this early offensive funk that they had in that game. And, that's not to say that that'll always be the case, but there is something to be said for that, and how it kind of like basically said, this is the worst thing that could have happened. You have your bell cow running back, the guy that's got more carries than anybody in college football, with a shoulder injury, and he just had this very atypical fumble, and the worst possible bounce happened. And all right, so just go continue playing football.
Now what you gonna do? Kill me? That was what I was scared of. Now I'm here. It's the exact, we're on the exact same page. It's like, and again, I want to get in a shootout with Carson Beck. Yes, Carson Beck has been, he's been a diplomat. He's been able to delegate. You want to get him into a shootout still, because he's still got that fire in the back of his eyes. I think once we get to a point where we're going back and forth, it's barbecue chicken for Ole Miss.
I'm done doubting Ole Miss. I'm done doubting them. I'm done doubting a team that has defied what I thought was possible with more moving pieces than any playoff team has ever had, and it's not even close. I mean, it's not even close. And they've been able to get to this point by destroying a group of 5 team that people, kind of wondered, like, hey, are they going to come out and match what they did in the first game? And then they went out and handed the best coach in the sport a loss, a season-ending loss that was not fluky. It was, we're going to outlast you. We're going to make bigger plays than you will in this football game. So yes, I do think that there is a world in which the likes of Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, and then Keontae Scott, who I mentioned earlier, like they could absolutely fuel another playoff victory for Miami, and it's not going to surprise me. Maybe Miami's just in for one of those seasons. They get to play in a national championship in their backyard. How crazy would that be? Like this coming of age moment for that program. All of that is very much on the table. We could have a battle of belts with Kevon Lacey on one side and Michael Irvin on the other. Belts are going to be out in full display. I probably should have set the over-under at like 5 belts shown over the course of this game because that's just apparently the thing that we do now. But
they got to get a belt guy. Like, is it Patrick Willis? Like, who do they bring in to counter the Michael Irvin belt energy?
Patrick Willis could. Friend of the show. Great guest on this show a few years back. They have someone out. It's not Eli. It's not Eli. Eli can do a lot of things. He can sell me on a lot. I don't think he's embracing that mantra, at least not in a way to combat Michael Irvin. Maybe that just has to be Michael Irvin's thing, and everybody just kind of lets him whip Gatorade bottles and stuff like that. But what if Chambliss just handles all of this? What if he's just taking every little piece of this in stride and there's just nothing that's going to phase him? What if he just stays poised in ways that Marcel Reed and Julian Saint couldn't? I think that happens. I think that happens enough in this one for Ole Miss to earn a spot in the national championship. I'm going Ole Miss to win 28-24.
You hit me with the rest of the switch up because we had the exact same take on this. You were like, I don't know about that, Will. What about the defense? And we ended up right in the same place. I'm going to say 24-14 Ole Miss. I do think that, like,
I don't so the really... same score that Miami won against Ohio State, it would be the reverse. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, like, I think that's not just like we still haven't seen the meatball by Carson Beck. I know I've said it every game, but the other team has not. They've kind of played right into Miami's hand with the fear because again, like if any play can decide the game, you don't have to really do too much with your quarterback. If that's what it is. So I'm right there with you. I think that Ole Miss. It's not going to be pretty on a ton of this game. That's what Miami does is they turn every game into not a thing of beauty. But I think they just keep taking chances. That was the one thing that I loved against Georgia was they just kept taking chances. So, yeah, I think if you do that enough against any college secondary, you're going to be successful.
And again, worth remembering, the worst game of Carson Beck's career came against Pete Golding's defense. Very different pieces surrounding it. I get it. But there is something to be said. You do have at least somewhat of a blueprint if you're Pete Golding going into this game. I get it. Carson Beck is in a different offense with Shannon Dawson compared to the one that he was in with Mike Bobo. I think they really try and do similar things, though. I do. So I don't know that all of a sudden you have to reinvent the wheel and treat this like Carson Beck is a vastly different player, even if the offensive line is improved. I think there are things that Pete Golding has already figured out how to do, and I think that could be beneficial. Who knows, though? Maybe I'll end up just eating crow and saying, well, I was done doubting Ole Miss, but maybe I should be done doubting Carson Beck at this point because Lord knows he's been good enough so far, at least in these college football playoffs. All right, Peach Bowl, Indiana, 4.5-point favorites against Oregon. The over-under I have is 267 yards of offense for Oregon. That's what they had in the first matchup against IU. Lowest total all year, lowest total of the entire Dan Lanning era. Yeah, think about that. Even worse than Lanning's debut against Georgia, a game that I was at in Atlanta that Oregon was not competitive in whatsoever. It was even worse than last year's Rose Bowl to Ohio State, which was over by the time that the first quarter concluded. It was even worse than the Texas Tech game, wherein Oregon's offense was mostly ineffective or at least frustrating in some key spots, didn't really move the football particularly well. That's why that game was such a statement for IU. Oregon's offense got the benefit of that pick six to get to 20 points, but anyone who watched that game was like, wait a minute, Oregon cannot move the ball against Indiana. It was a slog. It was a slog in ways that it never is for the Wilstein offense. And you saw Mendoza, I don't know if you saw this, but Mendoza went on with McAfee and said that in his first couple of spring practices at IU, he realized this was either the best defense in the country or he just wasn't as good as he thought he was. I think it's very fair to say that this looks like the best defense in the country. It really any objection at this point that Indiana is the best defense in college football?
No, I think they've risen to the challenge over and over again. And I love the tweet that was like, I love the juxtaposition of Fernando Mendoza being the happiest man on earth and Kurt Cignetti being a man who just never smiled.
It is kind of perfect.
I could so clearly see him looking at that defense going, boy, howdy, it looks like I hope we're really good this year.
Yeah, and they are because Ohio State, Alabama, Oregon. Those teams combined for 2 touchdowns against that defense. That's it. Defense travels. And by the way, all those games away from the friendly confines of Bloomington, Indiana. Okay. Defense travels, so does IU. 12.1 points allowed in games away from home. That includes neutral site. Here are the defenses in the last decade who have allowed 12.1 points or less in road/neutral site games. 2023 Michigan won a national title. 2021 Georgia won a national title with a generational defense. 2018 Clemson won a national title. Worth noting, this year's Ohio State team, they're going to qualify for that as well. They're not going to win a national title. That's still a pretty darn good threshold, and not necessarily surprising to see that those types of performances away from home produce that type of a season. And you could say, Connor, it's a rematch. Oregon's going to have adjustments. Would fully expect that. It's Dan Lanning. Not many coaches in the sport. Maybe 2 coaches right now. I think Kurt Signetti, I think Kirby Smart. Maybe those are the only 2 coaches I would take ahead of Dan Lanning at this point. You could tell me, hey, they're going to make adjustments. Will Stein might be juggling 2 jobs, but there would be no louder statement for him to be able to make with the portal open than him putting together a masterful offensive game plan against what I think is the best defense in the sport. Kentucky fans, you are no stranger to rooting against IU. Do it one more time. It is weird, though. I have had many Kentucky fans in my life who have reached out or like, I'm all on board with this IU thing. Even Purdue grads. We're in Dunedin, and I'm going to like the local like Whole Foods. It was like Nature Foods or something like that or whatever. And I'm getting some lunch for the family. And the cashier, he's telling me, he's like, when does IU play? Because I was like wearing an IU shirt or something like that. And I'm like, oh yeah, Rose Bowl is Thursday, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, I'm a Purdue grad, and I couldn't be pulling harder for him. That's the world I'm living in right now.
Wow, these Big Ten homers, folks. Conference fans they got up there.
It's bizarre. It's Kentucky and Purdue fans rooting for IU. That is how likable this team is, apparently. We respect Dan Lanning. We call ourselves Dan Lanning respecters. If people dog him on the internet, I feel like I'm one that wants to come to his side. Fair?
Yes.
Okay. So far, this is year 4 of his coaching career. Many decades ahead, I believe Dan Lanning will have as a successful coach in the sport. But so far, he's 0-2 in in-season rematches. Lost the 2023 rematch to Kalen DeBoer's Washington team. Lost the 2024 rematch to Ryan Day's Ohio State team, the Rose Bowl. Both of those coaches took double-digit leads in the first quarter and looked like they were the better prepared team in the rematch.
Hold on. That would be the funniest thing ever if Dan Lanning is just doomed to be Scottie Pippen. Like, there's just always one team that's convincingly better. If it's Washington, if it's Ohio State, if it's now Indiana. If Indiana just slipped above them and now they're the team to beat.
No. If he's always Karl Malone. Scottie Pippen won championships, 6 of them to be exact, and is one of the probably 30 best players in the history of the NBA. Karl Malone, Charles Barkley couldn't win championships, and they were always told, hey, you're second fiddle. Scottie Pippen may or may not have sat out when he was supposed to, or at least he thought, get the game-winning shot without MJ against the Knicks. We don't need to get into that, Tony Kukoc, but Karl Malone, Charles Barkley is the comp you're looking for.
I like a Charles Barkley comp a little bit better than Malone comp. But yeah, I think that would be the funniest thing is if it was just all hype all year. And then now, and you look at Signetti and what they're building, and it's hard to kind of predict against that.
It kind of is. And look, 0-2 is a very small sample size. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily guarantee that that's going to play out. But does anyone doubt the prep of this Indiana team at this point? I don't. That's the one thing I won't question with this. It doesn't guarantee a win. It does mean that we are well past the point of questioning whether IU is going to get stage fright. Is the moment going to be too big for them? I think if they lose a game, I wouldn't really point to that. I wouldn't really point to the history of Indiana football. I think they've won enough of these big time games to make me think they kind of get it. And they're very present. They're in the moment. And it's not going to be, oh man, they just couldn't handle getting to this point in the Peach Bowl. Well, they already killed Alabama in the Rose Bowl. They didn't kill Ohio State. They beat Big Ten. They beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. They won at Eugene. Like they are okay being on this stage, and a loss will not all of a sudden change that, in my opinion.
And Signetti is a famous history disrespecter. If he sees you reading a history textbook, he sets it on fire. He says, you don't care about Alabama's history, don't care about Indiana's history, only live in the now.
He's kind of right, though. And that players know so much less about that stuff than we realize as fans. They really do. If I describe to current Indiana players what my experience was like in school, they would say, "Yeah, I was 5 years old, so I don't care about that. Why would I have any sort of idea who Ben Chappell was? Don't tell me that Tandon Doss made a lot of plays for a 5-win Indiana team. I don't care."
That's related to our point about like if you want to get sad, look at the birth years of recruits, and like same deal here. It's like these experiences that we all have. Current players don't have those. They only know the team that's right in front of them.
They do. And sometimes they'll talk about, "Oh, I loved this guy when I was growing up." And then you realize, wait a minute, that guy played in 2018. What
Joe Burrow,
2019?
what do you mean growing up?
I was a huge Joe Burrow fan when I was a kid. Good Lord, we are old. Time is it's a flying. I'm done doubting Fernando Mendoza in any way because the clutch numbers are insane. His quarterback rating in the second half overtime, the stat that I brought up with all the Heisman discussion, something I think is really important. It is now up to 206.1. He's not going to catch 2023 Jaden Daniels with that, but he's still the
Nobody
only.
could catch 2023 Jaden Daniels.
This is true. Yeah, many definitely not the LSU defense. But look, he is still sitting in that spot where Jaden Daniels is the only one in the last decade who's been better with at least 100 attempts. Okay. So I think he's big time. And I know I said going into the Oregon Texas Tech game, I think Dante Moore is big time. I still think he's a really good player. I don't think he's as big time as Fernando Mendoza. I just don't. It's fascinating to get a rematch with two guys who could be jockeying for number one overall pick status. Don't know that we've ever had that with an in-season rematch. It's one thing to kind of get that game to play out when that's maybe a question mark. Like I think at one point with the Texas USC, there was, is Matt Leinart going to be number one? Is Reggie Bush going to be number one? Is Vince Young going to be number one? And then go figure, it ends up being none of them. It ends up being Mario Williams. But there have been probably situations like that. I just don't think that there have been rematches like this in the postseason where that's been the case. So, and by the way, I think there's at least a decent chance that Dante Moore comes back to school. Wouldn't rule that out, as opposed to Fernando Mendoza, who is very much already gone. Like they've already gotten Josh Hoover from TCU in the transfer portal. Nobody cares about that. But this team, I don't think the dream ends in Atlanta. I think IU wins 31-21. Nearly identical final score to the first matchup.
Yeah, we hit on this in the last matchup, but I think it comes down to comfortability for me. And like, look, guys, we told you who Baron Morton was before that game, right? Like, I think he's done a ton of great things for Texas Tech, but there's a reason why they immediately bought a Times Square billboard to name his replacement. And so is being spent all that money, which is that Texas Tech saw they had kind of a hole in offense there. Now that being said,
Former IU quarterback, by the way.
there you go. It could be a spy. So that being said, Moore made some plays in that game that gave me a little bit of pause, and I feel like it was kind of it carried on too long. Like I'm not going to sit here and disrespect the Texas Tech defense, but when you have a quarterback like Moore, I feel like you'd want to clean up some of the things that he was doing as far as taking some of the bad sacks, having a couple of balls sail on him, missing some of the reads.
He
And I
missed
think
some reads in that game for sure. I thought that was most glaring.
Yeah, and I think that, again, that doesn't make him a bad player. I don't think he's a fraud or anything. I just think that when you look at Fernando Mendoza, what's so scary about him, man, is he hasn't even hit that, Joe Burrow 2019 power up because his team hasn't really needed him to. That's what everybody likes about Mendoza, really, is the potential. He's had 300-yard passing game this year. And that was, against Michigan State, just kind of like hanging out with the boys, not like it was needed. And so we don't even know what Mendoza would be like in a shootout like we talked about. But I have no reason to believe anything but that there's another chamber of his brain he hasn't even opened up that's full of, whatever secret schemes he has up there that he's been holding this long. So I say that to say, if these quarterbacks play as they have, I give a massive edge, or, a Heisman level edge, right? So it's a fair one in this season to Mendoza. But I think when they even kick it up a notch, it becomes more glaring, because the things that scare me a little bit about Moore in the last game, I haven't really seen out of Mendoza as far as forcing a play, as far as making a bad read. It's almost like Mendoza would rather kind of go down and live to fight another day than make the hero play. And I think in a playoff game, that's exactly what you're looking for. So, and again, you just like, it's one of those things where you look at the rosters and you go, oh yeah, these receivers that Oregon has, oh my gosh, they're freaks. You look across at the production of Becker and those boys, it's like, well, we're actually getting kind of the same things. So yeah, I think that all of that just being incredibly on schedule. And you hit on the 12 points a game on the road that Indiana is giving up. It's so
Road
funny to
neutral
me.
site. Yeah.
Neutral site, yeah, and it's so funny to me that about every year, every other year, we go, yeah, well, you just can't win with defense anymore, and then the team does it again, right? Okay, then Georgia does it, then Michigan does it, then Indiana does it, and it's like, well, we'll never have another Alabama dynasty, even when Kirby Smart's got, it's not the same. I think you see Indiana. And it's like, and again, not getting ahead of ourselves, but in the way they're coached, and the way they punch you in the mouth, and the way it's joyless murder ball. That's the word I want to use. Joyless murder ball is not possible in the portal era. Oh, it can't happen. And then you watch this team, and I think that gives such an edge because these guys are literally playing 2019 football, and everybody else is in the NIL portal era. So yeah, if you line up that same team that played Ohio State and the same team that played Alabama, and how adaptable they are, I just feel like they have too many ways to beat you to where I could trust an Oregon offense has been a little bit shaky.
Yeah, that's probably the thing that I come back to the most, because when this initial matchup came out, I thought, you know what, rematch, it always feels like a wild card. And admittedly, like, yes, I want IU to win this game. I want IU to play in a national championship. This morning, I was just finalizing my plans to be at the national championship. I will be there. I would like to see my school there. Crazy thought. And I am looking forward to seeing what Oregon can do to correct some of those mistakes with Dante Moore, because you're right. Like they did have too many of those moments wherein his best target, Kenyon Sadiq, is running free and he's just not even seeing him. And that's fear. That's what we talked about with the Miami defensive line. Texas Tech did a really good job with David Bailey and Jacob Rodriguez and those guys up front of being able to at least get him second guessing himself. IU can make him second guess himself. And we saw that play out in a very clear and dominant way. And I know it might sound a bit like a homer pick to say that I think IU is going to win and cover. Lord knows, I hope they do. But I think that they are rounding into form as being one of the more complete teams that we have seen in the entire playoff era. Like I think that's the case. And I think anybody that pushes back on that is just looking at the uniform, and that's it.
Yeah, on a related note, I think that them beating Oregon again would be less shocking to me than the jarring nature in which they beat Alabama.
I
Right?
agree with that.
And like we talked about the logo. Like it's one thing for me, you, Marlo, to all pick Indiana to cover. It's another thing to watch them just.
I didn't pick Indiana to cover. I didn't pick Indiana
Okay,
for what it's
sorry.
worth. I only picked them
Okay.
to win by 3, so I guess I was emotionally
Little emotional hedge.
that.
Okay,
Yeah.
but in your heart, you picked them. But I picked them to cover. Like that being said, it's one thing to pick that, but it's another thing to see it play out the way that it did and go, wow, they're just mollywopping these boys. This is not even close. And so I think, like I said, it's a lot harder for me to envision that reality than the beating Oregon again, than Dan Lanning getting up to the doorstep and getting pushed away again by another in-conference team. So yeah, I feel like Alabama was not a great team this year, right? They had 3 losses coming in, but I think that there were so many things leading into that game in the Rose Bowl against your former employer that could have tripped them up, and the fact that none of them did makes me go, this is actually kind of way less scary than that, because they've already in it. I hate to say it like this, but even if they lose to Oregon, it's not really this big, crossroads moment in Cignetti's mind. This game's stakes feel lower than last game, as weird as that feels.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana is 60 minutes away from getting to 15-0. That's bananas. Absolutely bananas in every possible way. All right. Let's do some takeaways from the SEC's bowl season. Some of this is a lot of this is non-playoff related. So I thought about kind of how I wanted to do this, because there are some micro and macro takeaways from the SEC's bowl season. Like one of the micro takeaways of, okay, Kamario Taylor, the Mississippi State quarterback, he's promising, but he's probably still got a ways to go. I'm thankful that he wasn't seriously injured. It looked like it was going to be a serious injury. It turns out not as bad as initially feared. I could say that Mizzou landing Austin Simmons in the transfer portal was the direct byproduct of Eli Drinkwitz being so sick and tired of watching his team fail to complete forward passes and desperately wanting to have Ahmad Hardy not face 8-man boxes during his pre-draft season in 2026 and go, oh man, this isn't really working out. Austin Simmons is a correction to what you saw play out in the bowl game with Matt Zollers and what you saw in those games that he started, even a lot of the games that Bo Perbula started post-injury especially. I could also say that Tennessee was the team who probably could have shifted vibes the most of any SEC team in a non-playoff game with a win. And now it's another end to the season that makes some doubt if Josh Heupel really will be this generation's Phil Fulmer. And there's certainly more bad vibes than there have been probably at any point in Josh Heupel's tenure. And I'm not saying that Tennessee would have been ultimate good vibes team. There is no ultimate good vibes team in so far, in my opinion, in the SEC. I
Ole
think you
Miss.
I think Ole Miss has the best chance.
They're it. I mean, it's like Ole Miss and then the rest of the body and the feet in terms of good vibes.
Yeah, even if Ole Miss loses in the semifinals, I think they have that title, or at least they have the best path to that title. And I
If Ole
would
Miss
not have
gets
said that
curb
2 weeks
stomped,
ago.
they're bringing everybody back. In terms of like Lacey and Chambliss and all that Golding, it's like, hey, we're just happy to be here.
Let's just do it. Ole Miss, ultimate good vibes team, at least in the SEC. Definitely not nationally. We'll wait and see how the portal plays out to award that to someone nationally. But I could say that even if like if everyone that played in a non-playoff game among SEC teams, I thought the guy who played the absolute best was Arch Manning, and I
Yep.
thought he was awesome. I think it's fair to say now that going into 2026, Atlanta and New York are now fair expectations for him. I don't think that all of a sudden that means we are predicting he's going to reset how we feel about college football quarterbacks and that it's a Heisman or bust season or it's a national championship season. But I think getting to Atlanta and I think getting to New York afterwards, I think that's very much in play. I don't really like just saying that it's just because of how he looked against Michigan, but it didn't hurt. It definitely didn't hurt in that discussion. We'll have a lot more time to dig into Arch Manning in the offseason. But what I kept kind of coming back to, and Arch is part of this, with a lot of these takeaways for the non-playoff SEC bowl games, I don't want to overanalyze these. I think some of these games are just in a vacuum. They're just one of one, this specific roster, this point in time, this interim coach, that interim coach. There's so many different things that have factored into these. And it's not to say that they're insignificant, but what I would rather talk about is the tweet that Danny Cannell just couldn't wait to fire off after Jake Dickert was just drenched in mayo. That tweet was 2-7. 2-7 is the SEC's bowl record. Okay. SEC's bowl record in games that are against other conferences. So you're taking out Oklahoma, Alabama, you're taking out Georgia, Ole Miss. You get what I'm saying. I think regardless of the opt-outs, the coaching changes, the injuries, I think we can agree on this, Will. It's been a disappointing postseason for the SEC. Yes or no?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I mean, Texas did exactly kind of what I talked about as far as Arch Manning having like a breakout. Outside of that, it's been pretty roundly terrible for the SEC. And the other win is against Tulane. I hate to phrase it like that,
Yep.
but it's like,
That's it.
hey, you beat Tulane with John Summer all the way out. You beat Michigan with you beat Michigan at this point in their season. Let's just leave it like that.
Yeah. I could sit here and say that's still bad. And I could point to what these SEC teams wish they could have had. Would LSU have been better if it had Mansour Delane and AJ Halsey on the field? Yeah, of course. Would Vandy have been better if Eli Stowers had been there? Yeah, no duh. Like nobody's debating that. But I would point that the playoff, it should be sort of a separate conversation. And it's a little bit weird because the way that the bracket broke, this was always going to be unless Tulane pulled off the upset against Ole Miss, this was very likely going to be 2 SEC on SEC games in the playoff. So it was going to kind of negate some of the 5 SEC teams in the playoff stat. But many, like Bruce Feldman, dug into that 2-7 mark and asked the question about the SEC's reign of dominance, because that's what all roads lead back to, as it should. I fully understand that. If Ole Miss loses to Miami, that's a 2-8 record for the SEC in the postseason. And for the third consecutive year, the SEC will be without a team in the national championship. That has not happened since 1999 through 2002. Okay. The SEC, those chants came out in the postseason. That used to be the thing during the postseason, which has obviously undergone major changes in the last few years. Okay. We're not ignoring that. I haven't heard those ones yet, unless I missed, Texas fans chanting them at Michigan. I didn't hear them, and I didn't go outside my door and hear them either. I couldn't hear that. I could see the flyovers though, which was really cool. Like we went outside where, I talked about like how like before that game, we were like doing stuff outside with the neighbors and they've got the flyovers going. I'm like, oh dang, that's right. That's something that they do before these games. And when I'm not at them, I can still see them from my house. It was weird. But nonetheless, this has been for the most part an embarrassing postseason for the SEC. The two biggest sources of that embarrassment, Vandy and Bama. Every other game, one-score game. You could probably say, and Vandy was a one-score game as well, so I'm not like dismissing that. But and you also had Mississippi State, I guess, lost by 2 touchdowns. That wasn't a one-score game. It was a one-score game late. Whatever. Vandy being embarrassing is more about Diego Pavia getting dunked on, who, infamously said on Bussin' with the Boys, you got to get to 7 points. You got to score 7 points to beat Iowa. Apparently 27 points was not enough to beat Iowa. And it's not that Pavia played poorly that whole game. It was kind of similar to the Texas game, actually, his performance, where first half was rough. I mean, really, really rough. And then the second half, he starts to all of a sudden kind of wake up and their offense is clicking, but still not enough to be able to outduel Iowa. Yeah, the Iowa offense. But he was the one who clowned the Big Ten in the offseason and said he wanted to play against the best. He wanted to play against the SEC. And naturally, Iowa clapped back. All these Big Ten fans, they clapped back because why wouldn't they? And you can tell me, well, Diego Pavia, he doesn't speak for everyone in the SEC. I fully get that. Lord knows plenty of Vandy fans are like, well, he doesn't really speak on behalf of this entire university. We'd kind of like him to be considered a separate entity, even though he's done great things for our program. I understand all of that. He was still clearly the best player in your conference this year, and he was still the guy that was the loudest about banging that SEC drum. Okay, he hyped the SEC, and it came back to bite him. And he didn't play for the entire conference, but Lord knows he didn't do the conference any favors with that bowl game performance. Okay,
it's a legendary wrestling heel move to talk bleep on like basically and make your defense back it up. And have you individually back it up on offense, but have the defense kind of get gashed. Because Pavia played well in that bowl game.
First half was bad, though. First half was bad.
I know. And it comes down to, funny enough, kind of what we talked about Iowa being weak at this year, which is like rushing defense. It's like, oh, this isn't a classic Iowa, defense, da-da-da. And so they kind of bowed up for this game. But it's funny that he talked smack that he personally really wasn't involved in. It was about, okay, well, we only need 7 points. It's like, well, that's on your defense, brother.
Yeah. And your defense also got the benefit of Iowa, for whatever reason, throwing on the 4-yard line on 1st and goal. And Gronowski threw that pick. And it was kind of a gift. Really, Iowa should have scored 37 or 41 points in that game. They weren't able to do so. The Bama part of the SEC embarrassment discussion, some might look at that and say, hey, sometimes you run into a buzzsaw. Indiana was the top seed. It happens. But the Bama part is tough because for so long, obviously, Bama's been the SEC standard. And meanwhile, this new age team just completely humiliated them. And here's an issue that I think Bama is part of, and along with Georgia, who has obviously been no slouch, but those are the two teams that have won every conference title in the 2020s so far. From 2006 to 2022, the SEC champion played for a national championship all but once. And it was 2014 Bama. That was the only team that missed a national championship appearance, okay? In the last 3 years, the SEC champion made 1 combined semifinal and 0 national championships. That's tough. I said for years, hey, Big Ten, you're embarrassing because you can't even get your conference champ into the college football playoff. That's a bad look, okay? So what does that mean? I think for one, it means that the SEC has lacked elite teams. And maybe some of that's the portal, maybe some of that's NIL, maybe some of it's coaching, maybe it's some of it's just Nick Saban not being there anymore. Could be all of it. Okay. Could be all of it. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's absolutely definitively one thing, but it's factoring into this discussion. I will say though, if you actually look beyond the 2-7, and instead of just retweeting whatever sort of postseason argument like fits your narrative, which I know that's what everybody's prone to do, the numbers do tell a slightly different story. Nobody referenced that in the regular season, the SEC went 12-6 against power conference foes in non-conference play. Nobody except Bear Felica was referencing that, okay? And I think Brett McMurphy brought it up as well.
We did a little video on it. Come on.
We did. That was before that was final. That was like week 2 or week 3, I want to say. Okay. But that wasn't a convenient thing to reference when it came to the SEC losing all of these bowl games. It just wasn't. The numbers in the regular season, in terms of record against other power conference foes in non-conference play, the SEC was 12-6. The Big 12 was 8-6. The Big 10 was just 5-7, and the ACC was, wait for it, 7-19. Okay, now the ACC and Big 10 have completely flipped the script in the postseason. If you add in the postseason numbers to that and just say, hey, what was your conference's record against other power conference foes? You just focus on that. Add in bowl season and the regular season. The Big 10 is 14-11 after a 9-4 postseason. Still ongoing, I realize. The Big 12 is 12-10 after a 4-4 postseason. The SEC is 14-13 after a 2-7 postseason, ongoing still. And the ACC, even though it's been awesome in the postseason, still just 15-23 after an 8-4 postseason. Obvious, and ACC still ongoing with Miami. Those numbers can change slightly, but for the most part, the hay's in the barn. If you look at those numbers, that paints a different picture, and it paints a picture that I'm not even sure it's one Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, want to acknowledge, and that's these leagues were actually closer than we probably gave them credit for. And yes, you can cherry pick a stat about playoff qualifiers, and you can tell me that there are other things that factor into this. Like if you're those two guys, you're probably also saying, hey, the Big 12 was a one-bid league, and its lone team who dominated in conference play, they got shut out in the playoff. And they still have one playoff win in their entire conference's history, and it was followed by 65-7. Like they can still say that. And you can also say, hey, the ACC just finally got on the board in the 2020s. Up until Miami won that game against Texas A&M, 7-19 they were against other power conferences in the regular season. Okay, so like let's not just totally dismiss the significance of that. They've had a great postseason. You could pick all these different angles. So what does it all mean? What does it all mean? Because it means more than just 2-7. Is the SEC just overhyped and fraudulent? A lot of people will tell you that. A lot of people will point to 2-7 and say that. It ain't as good as it once was. Shout out Toby Keith. But hear me out. What would people say about the SEC if Ole Miss wins a national title? What would they say?
Confusion. I can't even imagine what people would say about that.
Because as of right now, the Big Ten is currently 4-3 against the SEC this season. If Ole Miss wins, it's an even split. It's 4-4. Tie goes to the national title winner. Okay, if Ole Miss makes it to a national title, it'll face a Big Ten team. Are people suddenly going to point out that the SEC would have gone 16-11 against other power conference foes if Ole Miss wins a title? Probably not. They're probably not going to bring that up. Okay, maybe that's ambitious. Because more likely is that Ole Miss doesn't win at all, and many will read the SEC eulogy, and there will be, instead of 2-7, the tweet will be 2-8, or maybe it's going to be 3-8, or whatever it ends up looking like. Conferences don't play games; teams do. But the conference that has won the most meaningful football games of anyone in the 21st century is dangerously close to enduring a 3-year stretch, wherein that's very clearly not the case. Any other thoughts on that? Is that enough context to apply to the SEC's bowl season that isn't just simply tweeting 2-7?
I think that's all of it, right? I do have a couple of things that I'll take a different perspective on, right? So I'll start with a little bit of cope, and then I'll go to the real reality here, right? So I made a point about how just like sassy some of these college football playoff matchups are. We look at Ole Miss; they got 2 back-to-back rematches, right? I mean, Tulane and Georgia. I feel like some of these matchups could have been arranged a little bit differently to where it wasn't, okay, SEC on SEC.
Ole Miss and A&M, if you just flipped them, that changes probably a lot of that.
Yeah, and I think that like then we get to see a little bit more data because no one's going to give credit to whoever wins the SEC on SEC matchup. It's not like, okay, well, you won a playoff game because someone had to win, right? And what it does is it doubles down on the following playoff game to say, is this team any good after Alabama played this way and it was awesome against Oklahoma? Well, okay, then what happened, right? And now that same standard is going to be applied to Ole Miss, right? And so that being said, that would be my biggest takeaway is that we really don't know as far as the SEC's top teams how they would have done against equal competition because 2 of them died on their own conference foes' swords, right? But that being said, I think you hit this on the head, and I'm glad that you did because I think it's something that not a lot of people in the SEC will be saying, which is that, hey, I'm going to be real with you. Georgia and Alabama have failed this conference as standard bearers. It's just that simple, right? I mean, under the Saban era, there was that famous cartoon that SDS commissioned about 10 years ago when I was still there
My guy
about,
Davis J, who does great work. My wife, he's so good. Davis J, our illustrator that we commissioned many a time. He's so good that my wife's company actually used him on a few instances, and I've actually thought about like reaching back out for some other stuff that I've got going on. But Davis J is the man.
he rules. And that was one of my favorite things, or one of the things that SDS is the most known for, where it was like, a cartoon of Alabama carrying the rest of the conference mascots. It was like SEC, right? You're going to have lean years in conference. That's when your best teams are supposed to ball out and let us do some copium on the back end. Okay. If you're Alabama, you can't. I mean, look, Bama fan, like, you can't get blown out against Indiana. Like, come on. Everybody knows that. So that's not even really worth getting into. Georgia, got 2 years in a row of this, man. You waited and waited for Nick Saban to leave so that you could be the guy, so that you could be the team. So that, and again, it didn't happen when Saban was here. We had to wait for Nick Saban to leave so that you could be the standard bearer in the SEC.
Georgia won 2 titles while Saban was still at Alabama.
But it's not about winning titles. It's about being the best ever. And that's what we talked about with Kirby Smart. When he finally beat Nick Saban for a title, it was, hey, this could be the next run. This could be the next dynasty of the SEC. Nick Saban wasn't doing this. You could talk about, the game against Oklahoma in 2013. You could talk about the little lulls that they had here and there, but it wasn't like this. And we could talk about the new era of college football. But as we just talked about with Indiana, I think that's lazy because Indiana's built the exact team that we expected Georgia to build. They're gritty and they're, physical, and they have all the guys that are doing the right things. And I think it's funny that there was the feedback of, oh, okay, well, actually, that was a bad play call. The backup center screwed up. Yeah, Georgia got out coached by Ole Miss. That's funnier, actually. I like that's funnier because you're supposed to blow this team out. You're supposed to be the one who's hitting on all cylinders. So heavy is the head that wears the crown. That's Georgia right now. It should be Alabama within their own fans' minds. I'm not going to put anything on that, but you know that if you're Bama,
The counterpoint to what you're saying of Georgia and Alabama have failed the SEC in recent memory is that kind of confirms what the anti-SEC crowd has been saying all this time. Of those two teams have just done the heavy lifting for you, and this conference is not as good as you have built it up to be. And you could point to other things, and Lord knows I've gotten into this conversation with Doug Maurice more than enough times to point to New Year's Six Bowl victories and stuff like that. And there's a reason why the conference that recruits the best, that actually has the most NFL draft picks for 19 consecutive years. There's a reason why that conference gets the benefit of the doubt. It'd be weird if, the stat that I brought up about 2006 to 2022, the champion getting to play in a national championship game. It'd be weird if that conference was just viewed as the same as everyone else, okay? And the bravado that the SEC leans into is different than any other conference, even if they did get some of that same sort of on-field success. I think that there are other conferences that would handle it differently. So, of course, the second that there was going to be this fall from grace from the SEC, no matter what era of football we were in, everybody was going to be willing to point this out. Now, when it happens in the postseason like this, and you have, in my opinion, probably the strongest data point that you've had, the 2-7 mark, to say this was overbilled, this was overhyped, then you get more supporters to that discussion than ever before. Even casual people who are like, yeah, it's kind of weird. The SEC hasn't had a team win a national championship the last couple of years. You get more people on board with that. Even if I poked holes with some of the things that have led into that and some of the things that it's ignoring with the way that the regular season played out when those rosters were at least closer to full. So that all feeds into this discussion. It does. And what people on the outside looking in at the SEC don't want to hear is, well, it's Bama and Georgia's fault. That's kind of the point. It's supposed to be these other teams, these tier 2 teams that are supposed to get on that stage and dominate. And that hasn't necessarily happened just yet. Maybe it's about to happen with Ole Miss. If Ole Miss goes off and wins a national title, all of a sudden the anti-SEC discussions, they're certainly not as loud. You can't be at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's two things, right? It was always Bama and another team. Was it Bama and Florida? Was it Bama and Auburn? Was it Bama and LSU? Was it Bama and Georgia? Was it Bama and, Ole Miss for a period of time there whenever they were, making New Year's Six Bowls? It was all about, okay, you have your standard bearer and then you have that next tier of teams. You're right. The Vanderbilts, the, Mizzou having scoring 7 and going home is like the most sad loss ever. LSU is just a worse team than Houston. I don't know. Like I feel like LSU could have played Houston at almost any point this year and lost. But anyway, so that next the Tennessee's right. And again, we can talk about Texas, but I would argue that Michigan was way more bombed out roster wise. So it's really hard to take a victory lap there, especially with everything going. But yeah, I'll kind of just say it like that, where so that's part two, and I'm not taking the blame off of those people, but I think that was what the pride came from. Exactly what you just said. That the conference champion in the SEC was seen as the standard, and like I said, just to be real, Georgia was billed by us. We literally put out a video same day of what's Georgia's weakness. That was billed by us and the media and fans to be the team to beat in the SEC. And when you have this dream matchup coming off of a bye week of a team that you've already beat with an interim head coach, you should outcoach the pants off of them and you get to a big lead.
Full-time head coach officially, but feels like an interim coach.
Sure, right? And that being said, what do we have a discussion about? Actually, the second string center had the wrong call. No, the discussion should be what Indiana is having about Alabama. The discussion should be, you didn't get off the mat. We beat the snot out of you. It shouldn't be, well, actually, here's the thing. That game wasn't as bad. Yes, it was, because that's what we've come to expect. When you set the standard of going back to back, when you set the standard of saying, oh my God, Mike Bobo has actually figured this out. Branch is so smart. Gunnar Stockton is who he thought he was, and he played awesome in that game. I'm not blaming Gunnar Stockton for this at all. But if every post we do on SDS is, what about Georgia? What about Georgia? What about Georgia? We're ready. This is championship season. Let's make it happen. So I don't think it's time to say, oh, let's fire everybody, change anything, da-da-da. But I thought this year was going to be the Kirby Smart return to greatness. Is that next year, or is it passed us by?
I wouldn't say it's passed us by. It just depends on what you view greatness. Greatness in this era is going to be probably different than what it was in the previous era. It just will be. I think if we see a team that does, what Bama did with winning 3 titles in 4 years, it will be an unbelievable feat that will have new rosters. Even Indiana, if Indiana wins a title this year, a lot of those pieces this year, different than last year. Now they have a ton of guys that are still from that team last year, which was considered their foundation team. But, then if we're talking about the 2026 team, it's going to be, they've already attacked the portal. They've already been going after guys left and right. And if they make a run next year, it'll be a lot of new faces. And that's just maybe saying that the portal is contributing greatly to this. It's tougher to build a dynasty. The SEC has had varying degrees of that with Florida, with Bama, and, Georgia in the first part of the 2020s, which, winning 2 in a row, I do think you kind of get the right to be called a college football dynasty, but you understand what I'm saying. It is tougher to do that. And there are a lot more moving parts. The variance is greater than it used to be. And the margin for error is very, very slim. So I think all of that kind of leads into it. And I know there will be a lot of people that just want to pour dirt on the SEC's grave, and that's perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think that there's a little bit more context that goes into this, and maybe if this year has shown me anything, it's kind of just that the conferences at the power conference level are probably a little bit closer than we realized and that we gave credit for. And at the same time, everybody else is still going to argue why their conference is disrespected.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that goes in regular season scheduling too. But I think that it's about 500 ball, and I don't think we're gonna see these runaway records the way that we used to with the SEC. And I'm gonna make one more point off of that because you're right, and I want to make a key distinction. Remember, after that back-to-back, I felt like Bill Simmons talking about Jason Tatum. It's like, wow, he's 19 years old. He's playing against LeBron. It's like Kirby Smart's 47. He's just won back-to-back, and he's done all this. Our expectation of Kirby Smart at that point, like we said, is he could maybe not surpass Nick Saban. Well, he had so much runway. Maybe he could have surpassed Nick Saban as the GOAT. Maybe he still could. But I think that when you do what he did as early as you did, when you've only been the head coach at one place, when all of the head coaching records run through you, when you have the best 1, 2, 3, 4 year start to a career the way that he did, I think that's what we reset expectations to. So it can't be both things. That's all I'm saying. It can't be, hey, you need to respect us every single year and view us like we used to view Alabama, and there's a target on our back. And if we choke, we used to laugh at Alabama constantly. Like whatever they had, like a little mistake, like in the regular season against Ole Miss or whatever, I'd be like, Bama, and that's just what it is when you're the guy. So don't run from that. Don't make excuses. Embrace it. That's what being the king is.
Dan Wolken, the dynasty is dead. 2015, Bama lost to Ole Miss, I think that was, and then proceeded to win. If you include 2016, won 25 games in a row after that or something.
Yep. And Bama fans weren't crying about that. They were saying, watch this. And that's the mentality we need to be in, is if the SEC is really the best conference, watch this.
Yeah. It has not been there this year, but again, it feels like there's still a little bit maybe to be obtained if Ole Miss can go on one of these runs. Speaking of Ole Miss, let's kick it to our guy Michael Katz. Great stuff with him on the fascinating rise of this program and the immediate future of this Ole Miss team. A lot of different things that we get into. So here is Michael Katz. Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is the professor. Yeah, I can call you that. Just like Feinbaum. Michael Katz. Look, since you are to Lane Kiffin what Brian Windhorst is to LeBron, can I assume that you will soon follow Lane to Baton Rouge and that you are going to have some sort of notes app thing? Unlike Ole Miss players who are apparently not following Lane to LSU, you will still end up doing that, right?
I mean, yeah. Other than the coaches, it'll just be me, I guess. Yeah, no, we are somehow tied, and I don't think he has any idea because I don't think he remembers me when I was at USC because I was a student, and he obviously had a lot going on there. Yeah, this is my fate. But I'm committing to Ole Miss right now, as all the players are too, and I will not be at LSU anytime soon.
So you're going to have a tweet saying staying home, just
I
like
have
you on
they're
Lacey.
making the graph. They're making the graphic right now.
Nice, nice. Okay, let's talk about this extremely awkward dynamic because, yes, you kind of brace for anything when you cover Lane Kiffin, but every round now of this college football playoff, we're trying to figure out which of these Ole Miss assistants are going to be staying on board, who's flying back here, who's back in practice here. Your job is a lot different than what you probably assumed it would be if you ever got to cover the college football playoff. Are any of these coaches who have been there for the college football playoff, is there any possibility that any of these guys are going to leave before this run ends?
I mean, I suppose there is, just because the great wild card, of course, is what is Lane Kiffin going to allow them to do. I do think it's kind of a PR nightmare, and I don't know if he cares about that at this point. But if he decides that they can't be there, I think that's just a disaster. It's already a weird look right now, with everybody not exactly knowing what's happening. Like literally, I went to practice the other day. I was not looking for any players. I was just like, is Charlie Weiss here? Is Kevin Smith here? Okay, we're good. I can confirm that they were here on this day. I don't know where they were later in the day. The Baton Rouge to Oxford flight, I think, has gotten a lot of use over the last few weeks with those guys going back and forth. But yeah, I mean, at this point, if they've come this far, like why would they want to not be part of it? I don't think it's going to be them if they aren't there. I think it would be from above them, and Pete Golding kind of alluded to that when he was asked. He was asked several times during his press conference on, I guess it was Sunday, the Zoom, or maybe Saturday, but what the coaches are going to do. And he basically was like, they will have every opportunity to be here like they have, but I'm not their boss. And I thought that was kind of put the ball in the other guy's court. But I would be surprised, especially particularly Charlie Weiss. It's hard for me to not see him being here just because he really likes this team. These are his guys, and I think he wants to see this thing out. Obviously, he made a choice. He made a decision for his family and himself, but I don't think that was an easy decision for him. And I think that he's a guy who really wants to see this thing out.
My take was that Lane definitely wanted Ole Miss to be Tulane, but not Georgia. That because he wanted his assistants to be there to be able to recruit the portal, understandably so, going to be a big part of LSU's roster in 2026. And I do think that Lane, whether he wants to admit this publicly or not, he's not going to, because it would be even worse for his image, which he really does care about. But do you think it's fair to say that Lane is like secretly rooting against his former team? Or do you think he legitimately wants Ole Miss to win a national title?
I mean, obviously, he's going to say certain things on Twitter like, oh, yeah, go win it all. And I'm like, okay, man, if you really wanted him to win it all, you'd probably still be here. But, I know there's a money component to it because he's making money as they keep advancing. And obviously, listen, when you're making $13 million, I don't think like an extra couple 100,000 is like, oh my god, I finally made it. But it's nice. I kind of agree with you where it was. I think he was happy they made the playoff, and you see him win a game. But I think, like a lot of people, I think everyone thought that the road was going to stop eventually, right? And he was going to have his staff back together, and it was going to kind of be business as usual. And now it's kind of like, okay, well, as long as these guys are at Ole Miss, like they can't be fully committed to putting his new team together. And so I'm not saying I think he's hoping they lose, but I don't think that he's necessarily on island time with Trinidad and everyone. I think that there's probably a part of him that understands that as long as Ole Miss keeps winning, he looks worse. Because listen, the reason you left to go to LSU was because you didn't think you could win a national championship at Ole Miss. And now you are 2 wins. Your old team that you left is 2 wins away from doing just that. And the longer it goes, I think it becomes a tougher look for him. So I think there's that component as well.
I don't want to make this just about Lane because this needs to be Pete Golding, dominating these conversations because it's fascinating what he's been able to do. But I am curious, what is the sentiment among Ole Miss players about Lane? And it's fair if it's mixed because maybe it is, and different players have different feelings and different reactions. But is this run, is it a byproduct of trying to show him, hey, we're even better than you thought that we were?
This team has always had a little bit of an edge to it in terms of being the cliche chip on the shoulder, undervalued, all those sorts of things. The guys that maybe didn't produce the way they wanted to at other programs, and they're getting replaced or whatever it may be. So this team's always had a little bit of a self-motivated edge, but I think that with the way that everything happened, and listen, people take different jobs all the time, right? That's life, but there's different ways to do it, and I think the consensus is that the way Lane did it was probably not the best way to do it, in terms of being fair to everybody and kind of leaving a lot of people out to dry. But I do think that the most telling thing was, I don't know if you remember the day that he announced that he was officially taking the job, he released this statement, and he wrote something to the effect of like, players begged me to stay with them to coach, and I wasn't allowed to. And then you saw players start tweeting, that's not what happened. Or like, if you were in that room, you'd know that's not what we said. And I was like, ooh, okay, this is a real thing. I think that they were probably sick of it. Again, this was an 11-1 regular season team that no one talked about the entire year other than for the head coach. The head coach was the story the entire season. All the shine of this great team it really wasn't even there. No one knew much about Ole Miss because of all the Lane stuff. So I think that now that they can just play ball and they have their coach, a coach who they know is committed to them. I mean, Pete's a guy's guy. Like, Pete is the ultimate football guy. Like, and I'm not saying it's one is better than the other, but like, you cannot probably find a more like opposite guy than of Lane Kiffin than Pete Golding, just in terms of who they are and how they handle things and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's what they need right now. But I think that when Lane did what he did, this was always a really good team. Obviously, you don't win 11 games unless you're good. But I think the whole story was always, well, it's only because of Lane, right? Well, now, what are you going to say? You can say, oh, well, they have LSU's assistants. Well, Charlie Weiss wasn't back there running to his own end zone and curling back around on 3rd and 7 and finding Keywan Lacey. Like, those players make plays, right? So I do think there probably is a little bit of a like, hey man, like, you could have had it here too, and we're going to prove it to you. I think that there is a big prove it to you factor here with this team, and honestly, it's been fascinating to watch because We keep wanting to bring up Lane Kiffin, and national media, when they hop on calls for the first time, it's always the first question, right? Like, how have you guys managed this and blah blah blah. They're over it, man. Like they like, that guy's gone. This is Pete Golding's team, and I think it's really fascinating. I think there was this. What is this team going to do without its head coach? I mean, this is unprecedented, and this doesn't happen. And it turns out that they played their best ball. I mean, it's really incredible.
Michael, you talk about Pete Golding being a football guy. What have you learned about him besides the fact that he curses as well as Joe Pesci in Goodfellas?
It's incredible. And then sometimes he'll be like, sorry for swearing. I'm like, no, man, you would stop. But and that's fine. I love it. Again, it's very different. He's an open book, man. Like, there was always a lot of gamesmanship with Lane, and trying to like read between the lines of like what the message is, what he's actually trying to say. It was always a riddle with him, and that, purposely so. He always tried to be a little bit confusing. Pete is just going to tell you exactly what he means. It's nice I don't have to decipher his dog's tweets. That's also nice.
His dogs.
Well, someone's dogs. That is, yes. But it's nice. All he tweets is sharks and Trinidad flags. That's really refreshing. I think he's just really good for this team. Listen, it's hard to know how this thing works out long term, right? You don't know. I mean, this team was already so established when he took over. It was kind of like, and Pete even said it, like, don't reinvent the wheel here. Like, just keep this thing going. But he's done a really good job of keeping things as normal, quote unquote, as they can be under the circumstances. Obviously changing a few things here and there, but trying to keep things as similar as they were when it was Lane, because that won them a lot of games in terms of calling plays and practice schedule and things like that. But I just think that his sort of, I don't want to say aura, but like just his sort of presence has been really important for this team, because for the first time in like a year and a half, they don't have to wonder if their coach is going to be there. Like, he's there. He wants to be there. There's no flights going out to Gainesville and Baton Rouge, looking around. Like, this is a guy who wants to be here. He is their coach. I think that's really important to him. And I think that in this moment, that's a really big driving factor for them.
I think Charlie Weis Jr. is a fascinating person in all of this. And I was slightly surprised that he followed Lane to LSU. And you could say, well, he's been extremely loyal to Lane. Obviously, they go way back. They were together at FAU as well. And these are two guys that obviously trust each other a whole lot. But, he's someone that's had NFL interest. Florida tried to hire him last year to be Billy Napier's first play caller. That fell through. And this is someone who could have ultimately stayed at Ole Miss and had total autonomy on that side of the ball. Maybe that could be in his future. We'll see. Never rule that out. But were you slightly surprised to see that Charlie Weis Jr. followed Lane to Baton Rouge?
A little bit. Again, I know their relationship, and they go way back, and the loyalty and all those things. But and I think that what this playoff run has been really good for Charlie, because it's huge. He's a really good play caller, and it's not just all Lane in his ear and stuff. There was a part of me. I know Charlie really likes this program. There's no question, and Charlie's a great. Like, I talked to him at the Sugar Bowl, and he's honest. Like, yeah, this is really weird, but I love these guys. Charlie's. He's the one guy I was kind of like, man, I kind of feel bad for him having to make this decision, right? Because I genuinely think he was torn. The reason I thought he might stay is kind of what you brought up, is, as long as he's with Lane, he's always going to be talked about as, well, he's not really calling the plays, right? It's Lane's offense. It's all this stuff. He's never going to get the credit he deserves, or he's going to get, when things go bad, it's going to be his fault, right? So I thought that maybe, if he, like he's doing right now in the playoffs, if he had a chance to, run the show, I think that would probably give him a better chance at, I don't know if he wants to be a head coach or, whatever, but, or, the NFL aspirant, whatever it may be. I think doing it away from Lane probably sets you up better because they know it's you doing it and you don't have to deal with that narrative of, oh, well, Lane's doing all the hard work anyway. And Pete Golding even brought that up. He was like, I have no problem with Charlie calling plays right now because Charlie needs this, because all he's heard is that it's Lane Kiffin. He's like, no, this is Charlie Weiss's offense. And Charlie's been in his bag. I mean, he has called an incredible couple games here. So I think that was one reason I thought he might stay. Listen, the money was always going to be pretty similar. I know there's, Ole Miss is pretty well off too. LSU isn't the only school with money, but I thought he might, mainly because it would be an opportunity for him to show that he's not just a guy in Lane's shadow.
I bet that's coming too at some point. That's not just like, it's a huge get for LSU, especially after seeing what he's done on this stage in the playoff for the first time. But I wouldn't be surprised. He's still extremely young and seemingly has everything in front of him.
He's younger than me.
Oh, God. Is he really?
Yeah.
Wait, how old are you?
How old do you think I am?
Are you 29?
I wish.
Are you 31?
I'm 37.
Wait a minute. Whoa. I didn't know that you were older than me.
I'm 37.
You're 37?
Yeah. Breaking news.
Oh, because you went to, you know what confused me? You went to grad school at USC as part of that. Oh, okay. See, that's where I got tripped up. I was thinking that was undergrad. Okay. So now when I call you the professor, I'm doing so as someone that's older than me, as a 35-year-old. Yeah, still 35. Okay, so that makes me feel a little bit better. There are a lot of coaches that are younger than us in this day. I mean, we've got SEC coaches younger than us.
33, 34, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I
don't know.
Glad people think I'm young. I love that.
that's
I need
you got to bring back the mustache, and then nobody will be questioning you. Just like, if Charlie Weiss had more facial hair, people would be like, oh yeah, that guy's like in his 40s. And in reality, no, he's still extremely young at this stage of his career. I want to talk about Trinidad because the news on Monday that came out that if he gets his waiver, he's coming back to Ole Miss. I think a lot of people kind of on the outside look at that and go, oh yeah, like of course he would come back to Ole Miss. He was obviously flirting with the idea of transferring. We saw the AT&T commercial, as weird as that kind of felt in the moment, but also at the same time, usually if you're teasing something like that, then probably you're still going to end up coming back. Basically, it seems like now at this point, it's Ole Miss or it's the NFL. Where do you think ultimately he's going to be playing football in the fall of 2026?
I mean, you're expecting the NCAA to, make a timely decision and make the right decision. I mean, come on, man. Obviously he's looking for that medical red shirt from when he was at Ferris State. I believe it was tonsillitis or something that he missed a bunch of time for. I don't. It's hard to ever know, but I do think that him signing or committing to go back to Ole Miss kind of puts the ball in the NCAA's court here. Like, hey, this guy really wants to come back, and wow, you look really bad if you say he can't go back to this school that has really, I mean, this story's been incredible. And I know the NCAA doesn't always care about smashing dreams, but it's a pretty incredible story. I don't know if they necessarily want to be the ones to ruin it. I think when it's all said and done, he does get the waiver, and that could be famous last words. I don't have any inner workings of what's going on there. I've seen waivers happen for less, right? We've guys getting 60 years isn't that uncommon anymore. We've seen a bunch of guys get them. I don't know why he would be an exception, but it is, it's fascinating because if he entered the portal, he would have instantly gone toward the top of that list of transfer quarterbacks. I mean, he's
$6 million easy.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been a huge guy on the market. So I have to imagine Ole Miss is probably going to compensate him pretty well. He's going to be making a lot of money here. But I always sort of felt that like it never would have felt right if Trinidad had gone somewhere else, right? Like
I agree.
it just Ole Miss just feels like the place he needs to be. Like this place has embraced him. You got flags of Trinidad Tobago around town. Like he's got his own song. Like this place is just perfect for him. And I know that obviously, Lane was a big part of recruiting him, and so was Charlie. But Joe Judge has been a really big part of his development, and Joe Judge is staying here. And I think that's a really, really big part of this. The quarterback's coach, they're really tight. So I think that definitely helped factors. But I just think that it would have been really weird. And I know in this era of college football, you see guys at like 7 schools now. It's not uncommon, but it would have been very weird to see Trinidad at another SEC school or whatever it would have been, because he just feels like I know he's only been here not even a full year, which is crazy.
It's crazy.
But he's already an Ole Miss legend, and it's like I think he understands that like the grass is not always greener. Sometimes the place where you're at is the best place for you. So I think he ultimately, is going to end up, playing for them in 2026. And man, with all the guys that they've got coming back, that's going to be a hell of a squad.
Because another one of those guys, Kewan Lacey, we find out on Monday night he is coming back to Ole Miss. Doesn't have the NFL option, but I think everybody connected the dots when Kevin Smith was off to LSU. That surely that means Kewan Lacey's going to follow. Caden Durham hits the portal for LSU, and all the replies are just, "Oh yeah, that means Lacey is off." And instead, he's staying. That seems so important for this team moving forward and trying to keep that identity in place. When did you get this sense that he was going to be the guy, that Kiffin was truly going to go all in with? Because honestly, I felt like I even had that blind spot in the preseason, being like, is it going to be Logan Diggs? Like, who's going to emerge in this backfield? And instead, this former 4-star from Mizzou just comes on board and boom, has this historic season. Like, when did you really get the sense that Lane was going to put so much trust in him? And obviously this post-Lane coaching staff has continued to do so.
Lane is not a guy who throws around super complimentary terms about players, right? He's very matter of fact. But in the spring and in fall camp, he kept saying how explosive Kewan was, and just this explosive player, and he's tougher than you think. And when he kept talking about it, and I was like, man, maybe this is the guy who ends up being the bell cow. After what happened the year before, when they couldn't run the ball, I think that it was like, we can't have a situation where we don't know who our running back is. Like, we need the guy. Before that, it was Quinshawn for a couple years, and Quinshawn put up historic numbers. They needed a guy who they could count on. And obviously Logan Diggs has been a productive player, and he's a really good player. But injury history, he's a little bit older. Was he going to be the bell cow? I don't know. That was kind of hard to see. He always kind of struck me as a guy who was going to kind of be a number 2. So I kind of thought that the way they talked him up, and the fact that they wanted him out of high school too. It was between Missouri and Ole Miss. Lane really wanted him. So I think that, between all those things, did I foresee him running for almost 1,500 yards and 23 touchdowns? No. it's insane what he's doing. Especially like if you look at Kewan, he's not the biggest dude. Like, he's not the super thick guy. He's tall. He's kind of lanky. I don't want to say lanky, but he doesn't have that 23 touchdowns build, you would think, but he is tough as nails. Some of those hits he took in the Sugar Bowl, man, and he just absorbed them, and he kept going. I guess after probably, we hear things, and we never got to see a ton of practice, but he looked like the best running back when we were there. It was clear that he was the best athlete. I think after that Georgia State game, I think he ran for 100 something. It was like, okay, maybe this isn't going to be a by committee thing. Maybe this is his job. And man, he's run with it. He's been awesome to watch. He's truly he's a special player. And again, this is a guy who had 140 yards last year at Mizzou, and here he is. He's gonna, assuming he has a decent game against Miami, he's gonna be over 1,500 yards. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and the numbers are, they are indeed historic, and not just because of the touchdowns, but even like the missed tackles forced. He's
Crazy.
Second among SEC running backs in the last decade. Ahmad Hardy, the only one better.
He leads the nation in carries.
Yeah. I mean, has been everything that Ole Miss could have hoped for after last year's just disastrous run game that was turned into JJ Big E's to pick up every fourth down. You're like, this is fun, but
until it gets stopped.
yeah,
All I've
exactly.
thought this year is, man, what if they had Keywan Lacey last year?
Yep. He's a difference maker. He is the different, like, and McElroy brought it up on the broadcast, and it's 100% true. And the numbers bear it out. If you're just trying to figure out the biggest difference, because that sounds disrespectful to Chambliss, and it's not. It's just that Jackson Dart was still very darn good.
Jackson Dart was great.
But in these moments, you just trust Lacey, whether he's got a banged up shoulder or not. He's obviously going to be a big part of the game plan against Miami. Let's talk about that matchup. How do you think they combat this Miami defensive line that is just feasted in the first 2 rounds of the playoff?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I think both lines of scrimmage for Miami are just dominant. I mean, they've got an offensive line that they're all massive guys. They've got first rounders up there. I think they're top 10 in the country in sacks allowed. I think I saw a stat that Carson Beck has been kept clean on 84% of his dropbacks, which is
he's got the best rate in the country, and Chambliss is second.
Yeah, which is, I mean, insane. Chambliss, I think he was like 78, so like there's a pretty big gap there. I think with that Miami front, you know, obviously Ole Miss's offensive line has played really well this year for the most part. It's been kind of a surprise because it was a little bit up and down to start the year. They've really sort of meshed as the season's gone on. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Diego Pounds and Jaden Williams on the edges. But I do think that their offense is geared to combat those sorts of things. One, if you get them being too aggressive, you can run off them. But two, I think that quick passes are going to be huge. And Ole Miss is always really big in the quick passing game. Obviously, we saw some throws that developed down the field in this last game. And of course, they want to take chunk plays, but against the pass rush like this, I kind of think of like what they did against Oklahoma, right? Because Oklahoma had a really good pass rush too. Obviously, a different pass rush. But they figured it out in that game. And I think that, again, having Charlie there is going to be really big because I think they can game plan. You're never going to negate those guys. Those are all Americans, NFL draft picks. But I think that you can negate them to an extent by your play calling. And Charlie's done a really good job of that so far. I know that, you know, Georgia, in one of the most stunning things, did not have a pass rush this year. I still don't understand how that worked. But they're still really big physical guys up there, and Ole Miss was able to game plan around that. I think that's what they're going to have to do this time. Because listen, if you're leaving, you know, those tackles on an island with those ends for too long, it's not going to end well. With all due respect to the tackles, because they've been great this year, but that's just not. I don't think that's a game you want to play.
Suntarine Perkins, I've asked you about him before, and specific, not about anything related to his game, but have we gotten any more clearance on how to say the first name of someone who could play a huge part in Thursday night's result? Because McDonough is my Bible when it comes to pronunciations. Like, McDonough gets it right. Everybody else, like even Fowler, can mess it up sometimes. Yeah. Like, I had to listen to Fowler say Connor Wigman like 50 times. Yeah. But like McDonough gets it right. And McDonough was saying Suntarine Perkins. And I'm like, I don't know at this point. You say his nickname is just Get. We should just call him Get.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think I'm that close with him to give him a nickname yet. You know, I'm looking for I have the game notes right here. I'm looking to see what it says in here because I believe it says Suntarine now because it used to say Suntarine, and I think it was misheard. I think a lot of times they just sort of say it really fast. Or you just say Perkins or number 4. But I go with Suntarine and I haven't been yelled at. And that's all I can ask for.
Yeah, okay. Let's just Perk. We'll call him that. Last one for you. Ole Miss is plus 540 on FanDuel to win a national championship. Still the biggest underdog in the field, but those odds are not necessarily that crazy. You know, for a team in that spot, Lord knows many other teams have gotten to the semifinals and had much longer odds to win a national title than that. What is the Michael Katz likelihood that Ole Miss is the last team standing?
I like their odds to get there. I really do. Miami's really good, but just I think Ole Miss can figure that one out. no disrespect to Miami. I think they're really good. That's a really good team. But I'm not a team of destiny guy. I hate that phrase because it's kind of cliche. But like, I've been watching this team for a while. I'm like, dang, maybe they are. Like, maybe this is just like, maybe this is the storybook, right? I do think that whoever wins that other game is going to be really tough, whether it's Oregon or Indiana. I mean, I just saw Indiana do unspeakable things to Alabama, and Paul still got people calling in about it. It got ugly yesterday. Legend called in twice. I mean, it was not pretty for anybody. But and Oregon's really good too. I think it'll be a good matchup. I don't think there's a world where Ole Miss gets blown out in any of these games. I think Ole Miss is really, really good. There's definitely a chance. I mean, again, this team has been defying my expectations all year. I thought they were going to be 8-4, and I wasn't the only one. A lot of people thought 7-5, 9-3, 10-2, absolute best case scenario. And here they are. They've got 13 wins. I mean, it's insane what this team has done. So I'm never going to count them out. I think they've got a really good shot to get there. Obviously, it'll depend who they play in that game to an extent, what kind of odds I give them. But I'm not going to count this team out. I just think that they don't count themselves out, and I think that's really big. Like against Georgia, other Ole Miss teams would have fallen apart when they were down.
Last year's team would have fallen apart.
It would have been awful. That would have been. There's no way they win that game, and this team just has. I keep telling people they have guts. There's just something about them. It's not the most talented Ole Miss team ever. Last year's team was probably the most talented Ole Miss team ever. But this team there's just something about them. I'm never going to count them out. I think that if they're to get there, I won't count them out because I've been counting them out. I've been counting them out for a while, and I just look like an idiot every time. And I will not look like an idiot one more time.
Same. Couldn't agree more. Michael, you're the best. Safe travels. Hopefully I'll see you in Miami.
Man, be nice. It's nice this time of year.
All right, well, let's close with some lad of the week. Who you got?
So for me, during bowl season, in honor of bowl season, I think it's got to be our guy Kalani Sitake at BYU, having an incredible year, right? Being rumored to all these different jobs, staying back home, and winning what I find to be the most prestigious award in college football, the Pop-Tart Bowl.
Look, I'm going to pull it up right now. By the way, that man ate at least 30 Pop-Tarts. At least. And you could tell me that he might have had some people in his ear at Crumble Cookies being like, hey, dial it back on the Pop-Tarts. But when those Pop-Tarts present themselves, you go full stop. So I'm going to hold on just a brief second. Continue talking. Go ahead.
I love the Crumble Cookie element here. That's great because we're living in kind of a Nike Adidas situation where, the Crumble executives were on the phone. They were like, get those Pop-Tarts out of your mouth. We're a Crumble school. All right. So, oh my gosh. Connor's getting an arm day here with this bowl memorabilia he's been given. We got Team Sprinkles. We got Team Swirls. What do we got here?
I did this video ahead of the Pop-Tarts Bowls as like a full preview, but they hooked it up for those like that didn't see this beforehand. And I hope that every player got this as well. I'm guessing Kalani Sitake got this too, and probably just consumed it before the game and then consumed all those Pop-Tarts after he won. But this thing is it's so heavy too.
Y'all hear that? That's analog right there. I mean, we're looking at how long do you think you could survive off of those Pop-Tarts, Connor?
2-3 weeks. Easily. And I just keep it right here just in case I want one. Great pre-workout snack. This isn't a Pop-Tarts ad. It just kind of turned into one. But I'm assuming that all of those players got some sort of gift package like this because it's the best. At this point, it is the best non-playoff bowl. There's really no question about it.
Look, I'm a sucker for great sports marketing. Guys, sports marketing is not just taking games off of your television for exclusivity. Sometimes it's you get a bowl game and you really do it up the way that Pop-Tarts does. And so I think that's worth celebrating. I saw your Pop-Tarts influencer video on Instagram.
That's what I was referencing.
I started to comment a little bit, but I was like, you know what? This is a new lane. I'm going to let him flex his influencer wings. But I love how they did that, dude. I love how they sent that out. So that being said, that was one of the most fun, competitive bowl games of the season. We got to see our guy Haynes King kind of go back and forth and what was kind of lined up to be a harrowing comeback by them. But yeah, that was honestly outside of some of the playoff stuff, probably Ole Miss, Georgia, my favorite bowl game of the season. And you can tell it really mattered to those guys. And I love the crumble cookie element too, where there's like a crumble cookie Secret Service who's like taking the Pop-Tarts out of Sasaki's hand.
Probably unsuccessfully so.
Very unsuccessfully. And again, the ritual sacrifice was very tasteful this year. They spared one, all of the Thanksgiving turkey at the White House. So, the boys got to enjoy the ritual sacrifice nicely.
The slam and strawberry, the protein one, you can't taste the protein in it. I'm just saying. 10 grams of protein per tart, I think it is. So it's on the run, apparently. Bowl games are great. That game was great. That game was a lot of fun. And certainly excited to see him kind of stay at BYU at a time when it just seems like, gosh, everybody is just getting these insane raises. He was kind of at the center of that. Eli Drinkowitz as well. But just feels very much like BYU. He would have felt weird at Penn State. I wouldn't have liked that move. I like Matt Campbell at Penn State a lot more than him. But yeah, nonetheless, great news for BYU and great to be able to get a Pop-Tarts Bowl victory. My light of the week is Sam Darnold. What if I told you that Sam Darnold just joined Tom Brady, that guy, as the second quarterback in NFL history to have consecutive 14-win seasons? Crazy, right? Yeah. Think about that. 14-win seasons. This guy just had two of them. Did them with different teams too, because obviously the Vikings last year, Seahawks this year, also threw for 4,000 yards in consecutive seasons. I've literally never seen a quarterback from my team throw for 4,000 yards. Caleb ended with 58 short of that, which was,
of course he did. But you know what? You got your eyes on the postseason. You
Exactly.
either have the stats year, the MVP year, or you have the winning year. He's locked in.
Yes, and Darnold now eyes on the postseason because the Seahawks earned the bye. They earned the 1 seed, which is crazy. Did so by beating the Rams and the Niners. Did so after the Vikings basically said to him, we weren't really crazy about the way that you finished the season. We're going to ride with 9. Yeah. Seahawks even drafted Jalen Milroe early in the 3rd round. Jalen Milroe has yet to attempt an NFL pass. Now, they brought him in on a couple of these rushing packages and stuff like that. They have Drew Lock as well. But he has yet to attempt a pass. And I just think that Darnold should be celebrated. And so much of the conversation about him, if you watch some of these shows, are just like, well, do you trust Sam Darnold? Like, he's just going to make a mistake. And there's almost this like gatekeeping confirmation bias that's factored into it. And I know that the second that the Seahawks lose in the playoffs, because I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl, but I mean, they're the 1 seed, wouldn't rule it out at this point. But the second they lose, people are going to be like, well, this is why Sam Darnold's on his 5th team. And that's just so lame. Like, I hate that we do this so much. And I know that the defense is unbelievable. It's Mike McDonald has like the best defense in the NFL right now, maybe the Texans as well, but he's just having an awesome year. And the Seahawks are going to be a brutal team to face in the playoffs. And it's not just the defense. Like, JSN is insane. Charles Cross, the former Mississippi State offensive lineman, who was an air raid offensive lineman with Mike Leach. When they drafted him in the top 10, I'm like, what are they doing? That's like such a unique offense that he came from. He's got a $104 million deal from them, which is unbelievable. He's their highest paid non-quarterback ever. But Darnold is really making this team go in a lot of ways after a year in which plenty of Seahawk fans were bummed to see Geno Smith leave for Vegas. How'd that work out? My God. Seahawks obviously got the better end of that deal and all that. Better end of the post-Ryan Grubb breakup as well. We don't need to get into that. But, in a draft class that had Josh Allen, it had Lamar, it had Baker, Darnold could end up being the first of those quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl. And it's not that crazy. Like, imagine telling someone that 2 years ago. Actually, you know what? Sam Darnold, I think he's going to win a Super Bowl before Lamar and Josh Allen and Baker. And like, that's just not that crazy of a thought anymore. So Sam Darnold is just having an awesome season. And I know that he's probably still going to throw like 3 picks in a playoff loss or something like that. People will hate on him, but tip of the cap, because I always liked him when he was at USC. He was my favorite quarterback in that class. And I think that if you're a Seahawk fan, you're giddy right now knowing what you have in front of you.
It's funny that you mentioned Geno Smith too, because Darnold is just simply a fellow New York Jets survivor, right? Don't call me sir, call me survivor. That's what happens if you get drafted by the New York Jets, right? And so I think you just got to throw out all the tape. I was a big believer in, let's say, like 2020 through last year. Honestly, I just felt like the NFL product took a big nosedive. A lot of quarterbacks retired. Not just Breeze, but Brady and Rivers, who is now back, but Matt Ryan, a lot of the guys that we grew up watching who were real artists at the position, retired. And I feel like offenses took a step back, and all the PFF guys scrambled to try to make it about how defenses were genius now. But I think that this year has seen a true resurgence in the NFL of good football, of good offenses, of good quarterbacks. And I think that Sam Darnold is a guy who maybe the evaluators are right on him initially. Maybe it was just that he was with the New York Jets, because we've seen him be successful now at a couple of different places. And it's so hard for me. I'm one of the last hangers-ons usually to this guy is mid. Like if a guy shows me who he is, Geno Smith is a great example of that. And I feel a little bit vindicated this year where I go, you've shown me who you are over your career. You have a good year here and there. What does that mean? And so with Darnold, I actually feel like he just got New York Jets. I feel like maybe if you just take that part of his career out, and it's kind of a linear path. So it's cool to watch somebody truly crawl out of mediocrity. And yeah, I mean, 14 wins, back-to-back seasons. We could talk about the caveat of the 17th game now, but at the end of the day, plenty of quarterbacks have the opportunity, be it Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, the guys who have been there, Lamar. So I think it's cool to say, how do you like me now? Especially after the legend, the symbol, the phenom known as 9 took your place.
Good Lord. Can you imagine being a Jets fan watching this year play out the way that it did, with just one of the worst passing offenses of the last 30 years in the NFL? You have Sam Darnold doing his thing. You also have the number 2 pick, not the number 1 pick. And if you had gotten the number 1 pick, you could say, well, Mendoza, that makes a lot of sense. And now the discussions are, does Dante Moore really want to go play for the Jets? Just go back to school. Do that instead. So you don't even know what you're going to get at this point. And it'd be great if you actually had a good defense, and instead you became like the first team in NFL history to not have an interception in a year, which is almost impossible.
With Aaron Glenn as your head coach.
Glenn.
Let's be honest. You have a DB's coach as your head coach, and you can't get a pick.
Oh, man. If you're having a bad day, it all comes back to this. Just be thankful you're not a Jets fan, and be thankful you don't have Chad Morris running your offense, unless you're a Clemson fan. In which case, if you're here, howdy. We'll say great things about your team. Great things.
There's one very confused gentleman, I guess, somewhere who's just like, what did I do to deserve the Clemson New York Jets experience in 2026? The opposite of you, an Indiana Bears fan. Look at this.
I've had many people, shout out my guy, Gary Joe Collins, who have said, man, this must be cloud 9 for you as a football fan. Yep. Doesn't get better. Does not get better. Now, if the Bears lose on Saturday night, and if IU loses to Oregon, yeah, probably be my most crushing. I've said like IU football has never given me a bad day. I don't think it'll truly give me a bad day if they lose against Oregon. But if the Bears lose to the Packers in the playoffs, that will give me the bad day, considering it's been 15 years since I got to watch my team win a playoff game. Not that I'm bitter about it, but nonetheless, that's a pod. That'll do it. Told you we were going to cover a lot of ground today. Started with Chad Morris, ended with Chad Morris.
It's like a TikTok. It's like a 2-hour long. You start over and Chad Morris.
Chad, man, how fired up do you think he was to get that call? Dabo, hey, what you up to? It's like, well, just wolfed down a gas station burrito. Trying to figure out what exactly this Prize Picks thing is. What's up? What are you up to, Dabo? What do you got in mind? How would you like to come run my offense?
Could be worse, folks.
It could always be worse. Anyway, please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. By the way, we're recording late Friday night. We will have next pod come out Saturday morning or early afternoon at some point. So be on the lookout for that. Please follow us on Twitter at the STS Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ Rivera, at Ghost Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.